If you want to go kayak camping but you don't know where to start, then this guide is for you. From your very first overnight to a week-long excursion with the homies, these tips will get you going. You're gonna need to start with a kayak. We got our first kayak from Facebook Marketplace for $350. It served us great, and it's still around as a loaner kayak for when we have friends along on our trips who don't have their own boats. But we've obviously graduated to higher quality boats with our new canoes. A first kayak does not have to break the bank, but if you have disposable income for something nice right out of the gate, I suggest checking out Eco Fishing Shop's website. Just be aware that the secondary market for kayaks is a buyer's market. What I mean by that is if you do buy a really nice new fancy boat, that there's gonna be a lot of competition if you go to sell it because you decided that paddle sports aren't for you, and you probably won't be able to recoup your money. A lot of used kayaks out there are gonna be sold with a paddle, which is great, that'll save you some money. But a paddle is one place where I wouldn't want to skimp. Make sure that it's the right length for you and it's a material that you want, because having the wrong paddle can cause blisters, numb fingers, and sore shoulders from days of paddling. A lot of times we just end up floating down a nice lazy river and we just really use the paddles for steering, in which case any old paddle will do. But if you're doing a lot of paddling over open water, still pools, or have to cover a lot of mileage on a trip, you're definitely gonna need that comfortable paddle that's just for you. Don't forget a PFD. They are non-negotiable. Make sure you get one that's designed for paddling. It'll have a high back so you can lean back in your seat, and it'll be loose around the shoulders so that your armpits don't chafe while you're paddling. This sounds like a silly problem, but you do not want to have it. This is not a gear video. And as a matter of fact, we've already made a gear video that you can go check out on our channel. But you are gonna wanna have an idea for how much stuff that you wanna bring. That might dictate what kind of boat that you want. We go a bit overboard with gear, fresh food, coolers, and all kinds of stuff, but some people like to keep it really minimalist and just bring the bare necessities. Knowing what all is coming with you can really help you select a kayak by checking with the manufacturer's stated weight capacity. It's a good idea to leave about 15% of that stated weight capacity as overhead to make sure that your boat stays stable and easy to paddle. You're gonna need a way to transport your kayak. From roof topping to roof racks, kayak cradles, a trailer, or even just throwing the boat in the back of a pickup truck. We've used all of those methods in the past, but we finally settled on a trailer because it's just so much easier to transport your kayaks on a trailer. But a trailer is a big investment. It's got tires, lights, hubs that need to be greased. Not to mention you may have to register it and pay some sort of personal property tax. If you're overwhelmed by all this, the boat, a way to transport, paddle, and PFD, that's okay. You can start with a rental. Almost every outfitter offers kayaks in their rental fleet, and they'll supply you with a paddle and transport it around with you. It's a really good idea to do that if you're unsure whether or not this is for you and you're just getting started. While I mentioned this isn't a gear video, there are certain things that you're gonna need no matter what. Hydration or water filtration capabilities and dry storage are both 100% must have. We use a platypus gravity filter, but there's tons of options out there. With a little bit of research, you can definitely find something that'll keep you hydrated on a clean river. For dry storage, we use a combination of different things, but we really recommend that you check out Remote Design's dry bags. One of those big 60-liter duffels can really hold a ton of your stuff, and no one wants their bedding and sleep systems soaked when it's time to set up camp. It's also 100% necessary to bring the appropriate items to deal with your waste. You're gonna have to do a little bit of research on what the best way to dispose of the waste is at your local rivers. Selecting a place to go kayak camping sounds easy, but it can get pretty overwhelming. It doesn't have to be a river or a stream. Even though those are my favorite and in my opinion the best places to go, you can always start at a lake or a pond if that's a place that you're familiar with. And I do recommend starting somewhere that you have some familiarity. Otherwise, choosing a river that has a lot of outfitters or federal or state parks on the banks is a great jumping off point. Rivers that have banks made up of primarily private property can be tricky to access and tricky to find camping on. If you don't already know where it's legal to camp or not legal to camp, we've got a video on that on our channel as well. I'll link it in the description below. To get started with kayak camping, you don't actually have to start with overnight trips. Maybe just take enough for a picnic and stop on a gravel bar for lunch. Believe it or not, that packing and planning process is really just the same as planning an overnight. That way you can build up some confidence to get ready for your first overnight trip.
Ready? Cheers.
It's a really really good idea to call outfitters on the river you're interested in paddling. Even if you don't plan to use their services, most of them will be more than happy to give you tons of info on some of the most popular trips on that river. These more popular routes definitely mean that you're going to run into a lot more people, especially on the weekends, which isn't really our bag. We like the remote stuff, getting away from other people. However, these trips are popular for a reason. They're usually easy and fun and include some of the most scenic parts of the river. You're definitely also going to want to plan shorter trips until you get a feel for how many miles that you can cover in a day. It's always better to relax or even finish up early on your last days than to be in some huge mad dash or scramble to make up your miles at the end of the trip. You've got to be weather aware when going on these trips. The last thing you want to deal with is a severe weather outbreak when you're out in the middle of a river camping, because water levels can rise fast and all of these rivers are subject to flash flooding.
We are absolutely soaked. It just completely opened up on us for about an hour and a half.
The two-way radios that we bring on our trips also have weather radios. It's something to consider because you may not have signal out in one of these remote areas. You're also going to want to have the right apparel and sleep systems that are appropriate for the temperature. Freezing your butt off on the side of the river is not going to be fun. I find it's really helpful to join paddling groups on social media. It seems like there's multiple groups on Facebook for really any given river out there. They're a great resource, and the other paddlers in those groups tend to provide some of the most up-to-date information I've ever seen on river conditions or which trips are good during that particular part of the year. You can always ask questions of the members of those groups, or even just use the search function. Odds are somebody's already asked your question. You might need to learn a little bit about reading water data tables. This sounds complicated, but it's really not. It's really just comprised of two things: the flow rate and the pool. Each river will have gauges throughout that will tell you the CFS, that's cubic feet a second, and the pool, which is a measurement of the average height of the river at the location of that gauge, usually given in feet. You can use these tables to look up past dates and compare them to satellite images from Google or pictures or posts about trips that people have taken in those social media groups to see when the best times to float are. It's easy to get carried away with this, but it's a really helpful way to determine what the best part of a river is to float at any given time. We also use the Missouri Herpetological Association and American Whitewater's websites. They usually have navigability reports from other floaters that will tell you what conditions were good or not. Finally, you're going to need to know how to set up a shuttle. We'll do a really in-depth video on our experience with self-shuttling, as that's the method we typically use, so subscribe and look out for that video. So you have a few options for when it comes to how you arrive at and depart from the river. Paying an outfitter to shuttle you, your boats, and or your vehicles may be the most convenient way to do it, and it might save you the most time. Another way is you can always have a friend or relation who's not participating in your trip either drop you off or pick you up from where you land. Or finally, you can take multiple vehicles so that you can self-shuttle. For a self-shuttle to work, there must be more paddlers in your group than there are vehicles. I'll explain why in that upcoming video. Well, I think those are the most important components for getting started kayak camping. But if we missed something or you have another question, leave us a comment below and I'll be sure to answer it. We're coming out with new videos all the time that might explain some of these things in more depth. So look out for those and make sure to subscribe. And remember, adventure.